Welcome to another interview by the Laboratory of Distance Education and eLearning. Today we have with us Professor Tony Bates. He is currently the President and CEO of Tony Bates Associates, which is a private company specializing in consultancy and training in the planning and management of eLearning and distance education. They have worked with governments, either national or regional governments, with several institutions and organizations, including, of course, universities, trying to make way for online learning in the situations and the specific situations of these institutions and organizations. He is one of the founding members of the staff in the Open University, so he's clearly someone which has his career linked to the development of distance education, and he worked there for 20 years. And then in between, he has had a outstanding international career as, of course, a consultant, but also as a researcher. He's chaired several important panels in organizations around the world. He's published 11 books and hundreds of articles in the field. And he has, of course, a special relationship with Universidade Aberta, the Open University of Portugal, because he is Doctor Honoris Causa by our university, and he's also the chair of the international panel for the Open University of Portugal's move into being a virtual university, and this was a very important part that this panel had. As a side note, and because it's really interesting, he has some very regular hobbies like golf and skiing, but surprisingly, he also flies a small plane. So a full life, full of achievements. Thank you for accepting our interview and welcome to our university. Perhaps I'd start the conversation with what has been the buzzword in 2012 and 2013, and that is, of course, the inevitable massive open online courses. Of course, they started in 2008 by a Canadian group of researchers, Stephen Downes, Dave Cormier, and George Siemens, with, I think, Brian Alexander also playing a role in defining the term. But then only in late 2011 with Sebastian Thrun and his course on artificial intelligence has it become a center of attention for the media. And because these people have such a high profile and such attention from the media, people started thinking they invented MOOCs, and more than that, people started confusing MOOCs with online learning as if they were the same thing. So this is my first question. What is the problem with this view, thinking that MOOCs are online learning?
Well, I guess we can get rather protective, people who've been working in online and distance learning for 25 years, when new players come in, and particularly if they ignore everything that we've done before. So we get a little upset when they come in. But I think there's a couple of things to note. The first one is that it's really an extension of previous work in open education, not in the sense of open universities, but of taking courses that are taught at regular universities and making them available through the public, like the Open Courseware project from MIT, Open Educational Resources, and so Stephen Downes and Dave Cormier, they had a particular kind of MOOC, which I think is much more interesting because it's more of a community of practice amongst people. But you have to really look at the Coursera-type MOOCs and Udacity-type MOOCs. I tend to look at them from a socio-cultural perspective that, in particular in the United States, the public higher education system is in real trouble. Following the recession, many states made deep cuts to their public education system. As a result, tuition fees have gone up. And so the public's very much aware of the real and high cost of public education in the United States. And MOOCs are seen, I say to MOOCs are to government what free beer is to a drunk, you know. Mm-hmm. It's not a difficult concept to understand, but it actually doesn't always work out quite the way you think it will. So the idea that we could find a really cheap way of doing post-secondary education is very appealing. But of course, as soon as you start looking at it closely, there's all kinds of problems with it. I think that having best professors in the world recording their lectures and making them available to everybody, I think that's a great thing. But it's just like educational broadcasting. It's not really running courses for students who may be struggling with the subject.
Teaching in a more complex way.
That's right. And we all know that many students need a lot of support in studying at a higher education level. It's not just a question of delivering knowledge like coal. Knowledge is it's more like energy. You know, it has to be, information has to be converted, and there's a process to go through, and the teacher is a very important part of that process. And what MOOCs do, of course, is try to take the really expensive part of education, which is the teaching, take it out of the picture altogether and just deliver information. So I think that's the dangerous aspect of it, that it's seen, not so much that it might replace what we do in online learning in what I would call a more responsible way of providing support for learners, but that it's seen as a cheap solution to higher education. It's not a solution, it's replacing higher education with just delivery of information. And that's, you know, you can get information by walking into a public library. So that to me is the critical difference. Having said that, the good thing is that it's got politicians and boards of governors of universities. It's got their attention, and it's made them ask the conventional universities some difficult questions like, why aren't you doing online learning? Why aren't you doing MOOCs? I think it's our job to explain that there's a big difference between credit-based online learning and MOOCs, that MOOCs have a place, but they're more like a niche. They're for those people who really don't want to take a full course, don't want to get a degree, but want to keep up to date or find out about something that they're interested in. And for that, they're very good. But in terms of, let's say, taking people who haven't got a university education and want to get one, then they're not satisfactory, and you're not going to get a lot of students through that system. And in the end, the whole point about a university education these days, it's a rather narrow view of university education, is to enable people to function effectively in the 21st century, in a digital society and a knowledge-based society. And if it doesn't develop the skills that those people need, and skills that come from teaching method, they don't come through content. I mean, content's a means to an end, but you actually need to teach in a way that produces independent learning, critical thinking skills, knowledge management, and so on. And MOOCs don't teach in that way, not the Coursera-style MOOCs. So in the end, if what governments want is an educated population in order to improve the economy and so on, they're not going to get it from MOOCs the way they're designed at the moment. And it will not be a cheap... Maybe there are some things we can learn from MOOCs to increase productivity, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as many government policymakers think.
I'll take that expression you used, MOOCs as designed at the moment, to bring this question. So, right, like a bit after a year, after saying that MOOCs would revolutionize higher education, that in 2050 you'd only have like 10 universities doing online learning and teaching the world. Now, like 2 weeks ago, Sebastian Thrun from Udacity just reached the conclusion that MOOCs are low quality education. They do not provide an education that is compatible with his quality standards, and so he just gave up MOOCs, and he says his company Udacity is going to turn to other things. And of course, many people have followed. All these leading in this year and a half suddenly were orphans because their leader just disappeared. And my question is there a future for MOOCs? Is there any type of organization or structuring or redesign in MOOCs, or maybe putting it in better words, are there other models of MOOCs,
Yeah.
like connectivist MOOCs,
Yeah.
or the MOOCs that the Open University has been trying, or that we have tried here at Universidade Aberta? Do these MOOCs have a role in the offering of distance education? Is there a role for MOOCs still, or is this just an experience that went bad and should be forgotten?
I think there are some fundamental flaws in the design of MOOCs that will be very difficult to overcome, at least in the sense of having completely open and free MOOCs.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, there's no business model for free MOOCs, even as they are. So that's why Udacity stopped. They weren't making any money on it.
They had the venture capital to answer to.
That's right. And there may be some ways to design MOOCs using peer-to-peer learning, but we have to make huge advances over the way they're being used at the moment for peer-to-peer learning. The constructivist MOOCs are interesting because they work on the basis that every person participating in the MOOC has something to contribute in the form of knowledge to that MOOC.
So everyone is a student and a teacher at the same time?
At the same time. And that works very well with the community of practice. Mm-hmm. It works very well with already educated people. So you have very bright, well-educated people who may not be a subject specialist but can come and add a new perspective. But I'm not sure they solve the problem of getting to that educated level in the first place. Mm-hmm. Because learning is a transactional process very often. It's a dialogical process often at a university level, mainly because you're going from the concrete to the abstract and back again. And moving from the concrete to the abstract and getting a deep understanding of a subject often requires dialogue and engagement. Now that dialogue usually is with a subject expert who understands the subject and can help students in that development. And therefore, if you take that away, then you're not going to get that advanced level learning that we need from a university education. Mm-hmm. So there will be certain areas where, for instance, compliance